The Mercedes-Benz EQA is the latest electric car from the three-pointer star to launch in India, and it's an important one. This is the most affordable electric car from Mercedes in India, and it's based on the GLA platform, very obviously. But it's got its work cut out for him. You see, the EQA is not the first compact luxury EV in the country. That was actually the Volvo XC40 Recharge, and Volvo quickly followed it up with this, the C40 Recharge. This too is based on an ICE platform, the XC40 platform, but the C40, it really kills it with the styling game with that coupe SUV roofline. But the thing about electric cars is that electrics really level the playing field, and there are a lot of manufacturers that don't really compete in the traditional luxury space but can in the electric car space, like the Kia EV6. This is based on a pure EV platform, the eGMP skateboard platform, and it gives the EV6 a lot of packaging and space advantages on the inside. Now, if you had 60 to 70 lakh rupees to spend on an electric car today, which of these three should you be parking in your garage? That's what we're gonna find out. Now, before we go ahead, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Evo India channel, and leave a comment down below. Which of these three would you like to buy if you had the money? Let's talk about styling of the EQA first. This is Mercedes-Benz's most compact electric car, but it gets the Mercedes-Benz electric face. So you get these headlamps that are connected to the grille, you get this light bar, you get a solid grille with many three-pointed star elements on it, and it's a familiar face because we've seen it on other Merc electric cars as well. Do you like it? Honestly, I think it looks the best on this car. The friendly face of this EV suits the EQA's compact dimensions a lot more than it does on, say, an EQE SUV or the EQS. When you come over to the side, you'll see that this is not the longest, but not also the shortest in its class. The EQA is slightly longer than the Volvo C40, and the wheelbase is slightly longer as well. Something that I really like on the EQA are the wheels. These are AMG Aero optimized lightweight wheels, obviously for efficiency. They look very cool, and they are 19 inches, just like all the other cars on this test. When you come over to the rear, again, it looks very similar to a GLA, but you've got the EQ styling elements with the light bar at the back. Overall, the EQA, it's a nice looking car, but it's not going to set your heart on fire with the way it looks. When we talk about boot space, open this up and you realize the EQA, it has 340 liters of space in here. That is less than the standard GLA, and that's also the smallest in this test. To compound things, you've got all this charging equipment and the first aid kit and all of that stuff lying in here, which further eats into boot space. So not a very practical car if you're planning to load it up with luggage. The C40 is very obviously based on the XC40, and you can tell because they share a face. They look very similar from the front. And let me tell you, despite this being quite a dated design, it still looks fresh in 2024. It's been around for many years, but it doesn't look old. And I particularly love the Thor Hammers DRL element. That looks so cool. Over at the side, you'll notice the C40 has 19-inch aero wheels, and the wheelbase is actually the shortest in this test, which does compromise space on the inside, but we'll know that when we get inside the car and review it from in there. The defining feature of the C40 is this sloping roofline. That is what critically differentiates it from the XC40 SUV, and it looks very cool from the rear. This is the best angle to view the C40. You've got these twin wings, you've got these vertically stacked tail lamps. It looks very nice, very sporty, very aggressive, but there's a problem. The C40, despite this derriere, isn't the best looking car in this test. Now, in terms of space in the boot, open this up and you'll see that the Volvo has a 413 litre boot, which is slightly larger than the Mercedes-Benz EQA. But here as well, you've got to contend with the space saver being in the boot, and that chews into a little bit of the space, the usable space that you have on offer. But the Volvo does have a frunk, 31 litre frunk, which is slightly useful when you need it. That's because the Kia EV6's rear end is one of the best looking in the business. Check out this sloping roofline that ends in this kicked out wing. The light bar is a beautiful touch. The wing is really aggressive. It's wide. It's got great proportions. The Kia EV6 is one of the nicest looking cars on sale in India today. Even when you come over to the side, you'll notice other cool elements. Flush door handles, 19-inch aero wheels. This is also a very large car. It's around 280 millimeters longer than the Volvo, and the wheelbase itself is 200 millimeters longer than the other cars here. This is a really large car. It's a size up, maybe 2 sizes up on the other SUVs in this test, and it shows. From the front, you'll notice more cool styling elements. The front DRLs are really intricate. They have a really nice style to them. You've got a tiny version of the Tiger Nose grille. The proportions of the car, you can tell, it takes advantage of the eGMP skateboard platform that this is based on. The wheels are pushed out right to the end. The overhangs are really short, and it just looks very menacing. Based on the GT line, it's very sporty, looks wide, low. The stance is great. Honestly, it doesn't have a luxury badge, but between the three, this one is the nicest looking of the lot. Another advantage of the large footprint of the EV6 is in how much luggage you can carry. The EV6 has the largest boot in this test, 520 liters, which means you can carry a fair few bags in here. Plus, because this is a born EV platform, you have a frunk which is small, but a frunk nevertheless. When you step inside the EQA, you realize how rich and luxurious the interiors feel. The material selection feels good. You've got this lovely bronze finishing on the aircon vents. The screens, they look really nice. The colors are bright. The resolution is crisp. These are twin 10.25-inch units, and they sit on top of the screen, standard across a lot of these small Mercedes-Benz cars, and they look very nice. You've got a nice steering wheel. This is from the more expensive Mercs, this AMG style steering wheel. It doesn't have AMG branding on it, but it gets these twin spokes with touch panels on them. I'm not a fan of the touch panels to use. They can be a little fiddly sometimes. The wheel itself is chunky and nice to hold. Overall, the cabin feels like an entry-level luxury car should. You step inside and you feel special. In terms of features as well, you're very well taken care of. You've got a head-up display, you've got a 360-degree camera, you've got this panoramic sunroof with a split down the middle. But I think my favorite feature on the EQA in terms of equipment is the 710-watt Burmester audio system. It really takes the cake in terms of audio quality. Another thing you get, which I shouldn't be mentioning, but strangely in this test, this is the only car that gets it, is wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. Both the other cars in this test have wired CarPlay and Android Auto, which is a little weird considering we're talking about a 60 lakh price point. Now, let's head into the back and see what that's like. In the back seat, you have an acceptable amount of space for your knees and for your head. I mean, this is not the shortest wheelbase in its class, but space is acceptable. What I have a big complaint about is the under thigh support, and this is a standard issue across most EVs. Because the battery is in the floor gets raised up to a point where your seating position is a knees up position. The distance between the seat bottom and the floor is not enough, and that is most exaggerated in the Mercedes-Benz EQA. This is not a very comfortable seating position, and you will not be happy here for too long. When you sit inside the Volvo C40, you're greeted with a very familiar dash, maybe a little too familiar. This dash layout on Volvos has been around for many years now, and it's starting to look a little bit old. You get the same 9-inch touchscreen infotainment system. Over the years, the interface has been updated, but this layout of screen, AC controls and volume controls hasn't changed at all. Now this screen, it's interesting because it runs Google natively, and that gives you a few advantages. For example, your Google Maps is run natively on here, and because of that, you can see Google Maps on your instrument cluster without any hassle. Really useful when you're driving long distances. But what I don't like is that the AC controls remain in the screen. You still have to tap the touch panel down there to bring up the AC controls. That aside, in terms of features, you've got Harman Kardon audio, you've got a wireless phone charger, you've got Apple CarPlay, but it is wired through a Type-C port over here. You also have a panoramic sunroof. In fact, you have the biggest sunroof in this test in the Volvo C40, but there is a flaw. There is no blind to cover the glass of the sunroof, and I suspect that could be a little difficult in the Indian summers. That aside, material selection is nice in here. You've got this felt lining on the doors, you've got nice quality plastics all over the dash, and these seats have this Alcantara-like, suede-like finish to the seats, which really feel nice and very luxury. Now, let's head into the back and see what that's like. In the second row of the Volvo C40, despite the short wheelbase, I have an okay amount of knee room. I'm not going to complain too much about knee room, but headroom is at a slight premium. This panoramic sunroof stretches all the way back and this curved roofline tapers down. So you do have a slight premium on headroom. I'm 5'10", I'm okay in here, but any taller and you will be complaining. Another complaint I have of the back seat is that the backrest angle is too upright and this seat squab is a little too short. So it's not the most comfortable seating position. Again, because of the high floor, my knees are a little upright and I just feel a little hunched and crouched in here rather than comfortable. If you're looking for a back seat drive, I don't think the C40 is the one for you. The first thing you realize when you step into the interior of the EV6 is just how much space you have compared to the other two. This is a larger car, so obviously you have more space, but it's also based on an electric skateboard platform, which has allowed the designers to do innovative things with the space inside the car. You've got a really deep cubby hole in here, your traditional cup holders up here, but you've also got a very large storage underneath the center console. The center console also doesn't go and meet the dash. It's a floating center console, so you've actually got a lot of space underneath this, which just makes the cabin feel a lot more airy. Now, talking about the layout, it's a very traditional but also very intuitive layout. You've got your steering wheel controls, you've got twin screens up front, 12.3-inch units, very Mercedes-like, if I may say so, but these are 12.3 and they actually one-up the screens in the EQA. Below that, you've got your AC controls. This is a touch panel, so it's not the most intuitive to use, but it is a separate panel and all the controls are not stuck into this screen, which I appreciate. Down here, you've got your gear selector, your start-stop button, and a few controls for seat heating and steering heating and cooling. So overall, it's a very well laid out cabin, and in terms of equipment as well, it is very well done. You've got seat ventilation and seat heating, you've got your drive modes, you've got Meridian audio, you've got a wireless phone charger, you've also got a 360-degree camera. But two critical things that you miss out on are wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. You have to use a cable and a Type A USB cable to connect it, which is why I can't use CarPlay in this car, because I don't have a Type A USB cable anymore. And you have a regular size sunroof. There is no panoramic sunroof over here. Now, let's step into the back seat and see what that's like. Jumping into the back seat, this is where you realize the size and the wheelbase of the car really pays dividends. Just look at the amount of room I have in terms of knee room. This is a lot of space, and being the biggest car in this test, this is where you'll be most happy in the back seat. That said, the same issue persists from the other cars to this one. Because the floor is high, you have very little under-thigh support, and that can make it a little tedious on long journeys. Also, your sunroof doesn't stretch all the way back, so you don't have a panoramic sunroof. But that said, because of that, you have good headroom. This does have a sloping roofline, but I'm not compromised in terms of headroom over here. In terms of amenities at the back, you've got your USB Type-C charging ports, but you've also got a 3-point socket placed underneath the seat. So if you want to charge something like a laptop, you can actually plug it in and work out of the back seat. Something else that might bother some people is the fact that these large headrests of the front seat don't allow you to see the road, and that might make a few people uncomfortable. But as far as back seats go, this one takes the cake. Let's start in the EQA, because this is the newest car over here. And when you jump in, the first thing you notice is how similar it feels to the GLA to drive. And that's obvious because it's based on the GLA's ICE platform. So the way it drives, the way it handles, the way it goes about its business is very GLA-like, very familiar, and that's a good thing. What's different from the GLA is obviously the drivetrain. You've got an electric drivetrain here. you've got a large battery, you've got one motor up on the front axle, front wheel drive only. This is the only front wheel drive car in this test today, and in terms of power, it makes 187 bhp and 385 Nm of torque. Now let's be fair, that's the lowest in this test by a fair bit, and that reflects in the performance as well. 0 to 100, 8.6 seconds. It's a lot slower than the other two cars in this test. Do I miss the all-wheel drive? Honestly, no. You know, I don't really mind the fact that this doesn't have all-wheel drive. It's not like it's squealing tires every time I put down power. Sure, there's a little bit of torque steer when you drive it around, but it's not intrusive. And unless you're going to be driving this over really long distances on the highway, in wet conditions, in slippery conditions, the lack of AWD is not going to really make a difference. It's not like these SUVs are going to head out off-road and are going to, be driving up trails and are traction limited in that sense. So the AWD on these other SUVs are primarily there for more power. They add a second motor to just add a little bit of performance, and they're also there to aid with traction in really slippery tarmac conditions. So unless you're living in the mountains where you've got icy conditions for a couple of months in the year, you're not really going to miss the AWD on the EQA, honestly. So the EQA isn't performance focused. It's not the kind of electric car that, you show your friends, hey, check out how quickly my car accelerates, put them in the passenger seat, do launches off the line and have their stomachs churn. It's not that kind of a car. It's not trying to be that kind of a car. It's trying to be more of a daily usable everyday car. It gives you adequate performance. So the sort of performance that you have is more than enough to go about whatever use cases you would use this car for. If you're driving in the city and you want to make a quick overtake, there is enough punch to accelerate at lower speeds. At higher speeds on the highway, that punchiness is a little less, but you click the dynamic button, put it into sport mode, and then even at say 90, 100 kilometers an hour, if you punch it to make an overtake, it will pick up speed fairly quickly. It's not going to be neck snapping, but it will do the job. And that's the whole idea of this EQA. They've sort of dialed back the performance to a level where it's enough, but in the process, they've tried to give you extra range. So from this large battery, you get a real world range of 450 kilometers, which is really good. This is not going to be lighting the fires of the hearts of any enthusiast, but what it is it does the job well. Now, ride and handling. The EQA actually has a really impressive ride. I was quite surprised with it when I drove it at the first drives. It does a good job of ironing out our roads. Sometimes these Merc SUVs can be a little stiff. They can feel a little heavy, the way they thunk through potholes and the way they go about their business. But that's not the case with the EQA. It feels light on its feet. It feels nimble. It feels like it rides well over our roads. Our highways are never perfect. You've always got a little bit of undulations in them, and the EQA actually absorbs most of that very well. It isolates you from what's going on underneath the car, and ride quality is definitely a highlight of this car. Theoretically, handling should be good too, because all the weight is low down, but let's throw it down a bend and see what it's like. Yep, feels good. Very positive front end. There's controlled roll, because again the weight is low down. It doesn't feel like a pendulum up top, but you can just pick a line and hold it, and it does reasonably well. I mean, the EQA is not going to be a car that's going to be driving aggressively up and down hills. I think there's plenty more Mercs to do that in. It's probably the least suited to that, but it does the job, it does it just fine. If I had to criticize something about its driving characteristics, it would be the brakes. They don't feel supernatural. They feel a little vague. And this is something I said at the first drive as well. And even in this company, they do feel you just have to go a little bit deeper in the travel to get it to stop. Which I guess, it could be a personal opinion, but yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the brakes. But that aside, the EQA feels really nice from the inside. It feels special. All of the materials used across the dash, this perforated leather on the steering wheel, the bronze accents, the way the dash is laid out, the way the displays read out things to you. It just feels like a luxury car. And I think that's really the crux of the highlight of the EQA. It does the luxury business really well. It feels special. Every time you sit inside it, you feel like, okay, I've spent my money on an expensive car. It feels nice to be in. And the way it deals with our conditions as well, the way it rides, the way it handles, the way it drives, it feels like a no-nonsense car. The compact dimensions make it great for the city. The electric drivetrain is absolutely quiet and refined. There's no noise, no vibrations, nothing coming out of it. So overall, very impressive machine and very nice to spend time in. Step into the Volvo from the Mercedes and the shift in performance is immense. This thing is ridiculously quick. 0 to 100 in 4.7 seconds. It's got 402 horsepower, 660 Nm of torque in this tiny footprint. It's absolutely insane. The Volvo C40 is hilariously fast. It just picks up speed like nobody's business. Off the line, it's super rapid. Wherever you are in the speed range, it's super rapid when you get on the accelerator. It's limited at a top speed of 180 kilometers an hour, but you can't do those speeds in India legally anyway. So within the speeds you're allowed to use, things are very, very rapid. It really pushes you back into your seat. I was at 100 kilometers an hour at that point when I accelerated. If you're at slower speeds, it's even more brutal. Your passengers, I promise you, are going to be screaming when you do this to them. It's hilariously entertaining. It's just so much fun. The throttle is very sensitive. You've got to learn to be smooth with the throttle because it is super sensitive to inputs. You can't just stamp on it and let off and expect the car to be smooth. The torque delivery on an electric motor is near instantaneous. So if you're going to be inconsistent with your throttle inputs, the car is going to be a little bit all over the place. So you've got to learn to be smooth with it. Your passengers, they're going to have to get used to the turn of pace because so often you are unintentionally just quicker than you normally need to be for any given situation because the acceleration just piles on so quickly. But as a party trick, it's unbeatable. It's just so much fun. This is a 60 lakh rupee car. You're getting 400 horsepower in it. That's nuts. I absolutely love that about the Volvo. The drivetrain, when you're accelerating hard, you do feel a few vibrations through the footwell. Unlike the Mercedes, which is butter smooth, you can feel a little vibration through the footwell. This also has two motors. It's an all-wheel drive car. One motor on the front axle, one motor on the rear axle, and that's what allows it to get such performance. The battery, it's a 78 kilowatt hour battery. That's the largest in this test, but it doesn't get the most range in this test because those batteries probably suck a whole lot of power, and so range is about 400 kilometers in the real world. It's not bad, but it's just not as much as what the others do, even though they have slightly smaller batteries. Before we get to the rest of the driving, let's also talk about the drive modes. It's funny, this Volvo doesn't have a sport mode, probably because it doesn't need a sport mode. It's so fast. It's just normal and off-road. I don't know who's going to take a C40 Recharge off-road, but you do get an off-road mode. I'm guessing that's for low traction start, low traction launches, and just putting down the power a little more gently so you're not spinning up the tires and calling in traction control every single time. Another thing that you can change on this is the regen. But unlike the other cars here, you can't adjust the regen to many levels. The Merc gets 3 levels, the Kia gets 4 to 5 levels of adjustable regen. In the Volvo, it's just one pedal driving or off. So in off, it's just coasting off throttle. When you put it on, you get a one pedal driving mode, and that's where the regen is really aggressive. It really slows the car down to slower speeds. You've got to learn to get used to it. If you drive it like you drive a regular car, it will cause you and your passengers a fair amount of discomfort because when you get completely off the throttle, it sort of decelerates very aggressively, and then there's a lot of head toss because you're constantly on the throttle, off the throttle, on the throttle, off the throttle. What you need to learn is a degree of throttle control where when you're on the throttle, it's accelerating, and then you gently get off the throttle and control your deceleration as you're getting off the throttle. So if you want really aggressive deceleration, you get off, but if you want gentle deceleration, you let off very gently, and then it sort of slows down a lot more slowly. So That's a skill that you're going to have to pick up to drive these EVs. The Kia also has a similar one-pedal driving mode, but it gives you the choice to choose. Here, it's either you drive it in one-pedal driving mode or you drive it as with no regen on. Now, ride and handling. Ride quality, little firm. You do feel a lot of the road, more than the other cars here. The short wheelbase probably has a role to play in it. Also, the fact that this has so much power, they probably had to stiffen up the suspension to just deal with the pitch when you accelerate, so you don't have too much of a nose rising when you get on the accelerator. But yeah, it does handle pretty well as well. So yeah, it's not the most comfortable here. You do make some compromises in terms of outright comfort in the Volvo C40. It's not going to be the most comfortable, luxurious car out there, but you've got 400 horsepower, so it's all right. Handling is quite nice. You know, you can chuck it around a corner. It will hold a line well. Again, weight down low, so it grips well. There's not too much roll. The steering, you do have a sport steering setting which can weigh up the steering, and if you're going to be driving it enthusiastically, I do recommend that. If you're out on the highway at higher speeds, I do recommend that because it just adds a little bit of weight. Doesn't add anything by way of feel, but it adds weight and makes you feel a little more connected. Yeah, and with 400 horsepower on tap, the corners are just hilarious fun. You can chuck it around, throw it around, just it steers beautifully. It holds a line, and then you just stamp on the accelerator and you've got 400 horsepower shooting you out of a corner. It's hilariously fun. So yeah, it has its flaws, you know. It's not perfect, it's stiff. Vibrations, you got that slight granular vibration at all times on the steering wheel and the floor. But I just come back to that 400 horsepower number and how much fun you can have with it. Okay, now let's finally get to the EV6. Okay, so what is this EV6 all about? When you get into the driver's seat, the overall sense of space over here is really something that stands out at you. It is a big car, it's a really long car, and the space on the inside has been very well utilized. Again, an advantage that is due to the EGMP all-electric skateboard platform. Now, what is it like to drive? Let's talk about the drivetrain first. This is an all-wheel drive drivetrain, so one motor on the rear, one motor on the front, 302 bhp and 605 Nm of torque. So a little less than the Volvo, and to be fair, it doesn't feel as rapid as well. In normal mode, it feels quick, it feels pretty quick, but it's not neck snapping. When I stand on the throttle, it does shove me back into my seat a little bit, but it's not nauseating. What you can do is take the drive mode selector right on the steering wheel and put it into sport. That immediately makes it quicker. The throttle becomes a lot more sensitive. You've got to be really careful with the throttle because the slightest of inputs has it surging forward. And even at 100 kilometers an hour, if you floor it, it really pulls hard. So there is good acceleration from this drivetrain. And if you're at lower speeds, it's a lot more entertaining. Let me just slow right down to 30. And then you floor it. And it's good fun. Again, it's not as aggressive or as rapid as the XC40, but it's quick enough. It's more than you'll ever need on our roads. Whether you're at city speeds or whether you're at highway speeds, you really don't need this sort of performance in everyday driving, but it's nice to have it. Let me dial the drive mode back down to normal. Just get it feeling a little calm and sane again. Something else that the EV6 does really well is regen modes. You know, you've got level 0, which is no regen, it'll just coast. You've got level 1, level 2, level 3, progressively more aggressive. When you get off on level 3, it really hunkers down. And then you've got max, which is almost like one pedal driving. And if you leave it in max, it'll actually come to a complete halt. There's also an auto mode, which sort of predicts what the traffic is like in front of you and then dials in regen accordingly. I like keeping it in number 2, but what I like the most is the amount of adjustability that it gives you. Unlike the Volvo, which just has one mode, which is one pedal driving or no regen, this gives you a lot of adjustability. You can choose and pick what sort of deceleration you prefer, what sort of deceleration your passengers prefer, because very aggressive deceleration and acceleration in an EV can cause you to feel sick. And then let me talk to you about ride quality. Ride quality is actually really impressive, especially compared to these two cars, because the wheelbase is so much longer. It just lopes over our roads in a more controlled, in a more poised manner. It doesn't get unsettled too quickly by bumps on the surface. There is a hint of firmness to it. You do feel a little bit of what the surface is like underneath you. You know, if you've got a constantly uneven or broken surface, or just slight cracks and breaks and ruts in the road, you will feel a lot of it into the cabin. But it's not to the point of being overly uncomfortable or overly stiff. It is a little firm, it is biased to a slightly firmer side, but like I said, it's never uncomfortable. I have driven this car from Bombay to Pune, and then from Pune to our shoot location. I've driven it around Pune, and the ride quality, you're never left wanting. You know, you can drive it in our conditions without stress. Another thing I was worried about was whether the long wheelbase would scrape on speed breakers, but it doesn't. It deals with bad speed breakers, even the really ugly ones, without a trouble. Obviously, you've got to slow down for them, because you don't want the suspension compressing when you're on top of it and then it's slamming into the belly. But you slow down for them and it won't scrape. It won't give you too much trouble. Now coming to the handling, because this is a skateboard platform, the weight is even more low down than those other cars over there. You know, it's got its weight really low in the floor. And the way it changes direction is super positive. It just steers in quickly and it holds its line. It's very controlled, very direct, very willing to play along in the corners. I mean, this GT line is obviously attempting to be a little sporty, and it can hold good lateral grip through corners. It's running Nexen tires, which are Korean tires, but they seem to grip reasonably well. I mean, they do squeal if you really push the car very hard, but if you're going to be corner carving in these cars, any of them actually, up and down hills, it's going to just tank your range, and that's not something you want to do. Instead, you drive this in a nice, relaxed manner. That's what it enjoys. Use the power on tap to lean into that effortlessness that it can deliver, and that's really the nicest way to drive the EV6. It's such a nice, large car, so much space, looks so cool, but then you can just drive it so calmly and just enjoy the drive. It's very fatigue-free. You don't get stressed driving it. In the corners, the steering weighs up nicely as well. You know, you can load it up nicely. And you can really drive the car hard if you want to, but like I said, you don't want to drive this car very hard. The drivetrain is also very refined. You know, you don't hear much noise. You can obviously put on the audioscapes and all of that, but I just turn it off because the sounds get quite annoying after a bit. I like the silence that these EVs give. While there is a little bit of wind noise, probably from the mirrors, it's not so much of an issue. You know, you can just sit on this car 120 kilometers all day long, no stress. There's enough range. A full charge gives you north of 450 kilometers of charge. Right now I'm at 65% or so, and we've got 290 kilometers of range on the range readout. So range is never going to be an issue with this car. And yeah, you've got all of your creature comforts, everything that you'd want in a luxury car, the Kia EV6 delivers. You've got good audio, you've got seat heating and ventilation, you've got your sunroof, you've got high quality displays, you've got automatic climate control, twin zone climate control, memory seats, you've got an automatic tailgate function. You literally have it all, everything that you would get in a traditional luxury car. And that's why I said these electric cars really make it an even playing field between luxury car makers and the rest of the car makers. In fact, the sort of value a Kia offers you at this price point compared to a Mercedes or a Volvo is really impressive because of the amount of power it has, the space that it has, the size, the visual impact. It just has so much going for it, you know. It's such a deeply impressive machine, such a well-rounded machine. So yeah, EV6, I'm a fan. Now for the final piece of the puzzle, the prices. The EV6 it costs to be 66 lakhs ex-showroom. The C40, 63 lakhs ex-showroom. In the EQA, 66 lakhs rupees ex-showroom. So they're all in the same ballpark in terms of pricing. But which one is the best? Overall, I think the EV6. It really is the best all-rounder. It's large, it's got space on the inside, the packaging is really good, the features are there, the comfort is there, the performance is there. There's really very little to criticize about it. And if you're somebody who doesn't care about the badges of the cars, the EV6 is definitely the one you should get. The Volvo C40. It is the thrill of driving pick. 400 horsepower at this price point. The price to performance ratio is really good. And if you're somebody who just wants something that's absolutely nuts, hilariously fun to drive, the Volvo C40 should be on your list. So where does that leave the EQA? I think it sits to Mercedes' strengths. Mercedes does luxury really well, and the interiors of the EQA do that luxury justice. It feels very special every time you get into it, and on every other count, it may not be better than these other cars, but it's just as good, and it really is a very nice all-round package. So if you are somebody that wants something that feels special, that has a little bit of that brand value attached to it, the Mercedes EQA is your pick. But overall, my pick? That EV6, it really is something else.